Good morning and a warm welcome to all. Esteemed guests, distinguished speakers, veterans, industry professionals, journalists, research scholars, and interns. I am Nisha Rebecca Epen, Research Officer at the Chennai Center for China Studies. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this one-day international virtual conference titled Maneuvering the Mineral Market, China's Rare Earths Monopoly, jointly hosted by the Chennai Center for China Studies, the Institute of Contemporary Studies Bangalore, the Press Institute of India in Chennai, and the Rashtriya Raksha University in Gandhinagar. From ballistic missiles to cell phones, airplanes, computers, military infrastructure, and data storage systems, rare earth elements have become indispensable to the manufacture and upkeep of some of the most vital technologies of our day and age. Given its value as a critical mineral, control over production, processing, and exporting of rare earth elements has a monumental impact on a country's economy and its leading industries. China's chokehold control on this group of heavy metals and its proven intentions to weaponize this monopoly is a matter of growing concern for countries worldwide. Housing the world's fifth largest reserves of REEs, India has an untapped potential in countering China's heavy metal hegemony. With this in mind, the China Study Forum has organized this one-day international virtual conference with a lineup of illustrious speakers and panelists from around the world in order to provide a 360-degree view for policymakers, industry leaders, think tanks, academia, researchers, and the media. Thank you all for joining us today. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Sashi Nair. Mr. Sashi Nair is the director of the Press Institute of India and the editor of its journals, Vidura, Grassroots, and the RIND Survey. Earlier, he was consulting editor, WAN IFRA, the World Association of Newspapers and News Publishers, editor, supplements The Economic Times, chief copy editor, The Times of India, Chennai, and assistant editor, The Hindu Business Line. Mr. Nair was a columnist for the New Indian Express and wrote on heritage, sports, and civic issues for Madras Musings and The Hindu. He has co-authored the corporate biography of L&T ECC and contributed to a few books on the history of Madras and some of its prominent citizens. We are honored to have you with us, sir. I now invite Mr. Sashi Nair to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, sir. Sir, you're muted, sir.
Sorry. Thank you, Nisha. It was a long introduction of mine. On behalf of the Press Institute of India, the Institute of Contemporary Studies Bangalore, and the Chennai Center for China Studies, and the Rashtriya Raksha University, let me extend to all of you a very warm welcome. I'm particularly delighted to welcome Professor Bimal Patel, the Vice Chancellor of the Rashtriya Raksha University and member of the National Security Advisory Board of India. And also delighted to welcome Mr. Nabil Mancheri, Secretary General of the Rare Earth Industry Association, headquartered in Brussels. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining, sparing your time to be here. And it's a pleasure having you both at the inaugural of this program. This program, of course, will focus on China's monopoly over rare earth elements and what it means for India and the world. I must mention here that this program marks the 10th year of joint programs that the Press Institute of India, the Institute of Contemporary Studies Bangalore, and the Chennai Center for China Studies have been conducting. We started way back in 2011 with programs in Chennai and Bangalore. For those of you who might just like to know a bit of the background, the Institute of Contemporary Studies Bangalore specializes in national security issues, international relations, and creates awareness about threats and challenges to India's national security, its focus is now centered primarily on cybersecurity as an important subtext of national security. It has extensive network among national and international institutions. The Chennai Center for China Studies carries out in-depth studies of developments relating to China with priority on issues of interest to India, such as geopolitical, economic, and strategic dynamics of India-China relations, the Sino-Indian border issues, prospects of Sino-Indian economic and trade relations, and the future evolution of China's politics and its impact of India in the world. C3S, incidentally, ranks among the top 50 independent global think tanks in the world. Both ICSB and C3S are public policy think tanks, ICSB headed by Mr. Heblika and C3S by Komodo Seshadri Vasan. The Press Institute of India is an independent non-profit organization which was established in 1963 to sustain high and responsible standards of journalism. PII's training workshops for journalists are focused on a range of issues, from writing, reporting, editing, to development journalism, women empowerment, child rights, to mental health, tackling fake news now, and of course, on national security and foreign policy. We have trained many journalists from India and neighboring countries, and we continue to offer fellowships. I must add, for the benefit of those who have not been in our previous programs, that last year, when COVID broke out and we were constrained to have webinars, we ran a series of webinars, September to December, titled Deciphering China. And this was very well attended, and we had a distinguished galaxy or panel of speakers, including people like Mr. Jayadev Ranade, Lieutenant General Rajesh Pant, Ambassador Sujan Chinoy, of course, Admiral Sunil Lamba was there, and Ambassador Gautam Bambawale. Today's program is the first in a series of similar programs that we've planned this year. And Dr. Patel, I must say that we are particularly happy that we are doing this in association with the Rashtriya Raksha University, a university of national importance, a model security educational university in India, which is focused on security, strategic and defense education, research and training. We are hopeful that this will also mark the beginning of what may be a long and fruitful association between our institutes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir. It is now my privilege to introduce to you Mr. Pratap Heblika. Mr. Pratap Heblika is a Strategic Affairs Analyst and Managing Trustee, Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore. He is a director at MaxGrid Securicor India Private Limited, a Bangalore-based private security consultancy company. Besides this, he is associated with several corporate entities in an advisory capacity on matters related to cybersecurity. He is also a member of the board of directors of the Asian Dialogue Society in Singapore. I now welcome Mr. Pratap Heblika to deliver the introduction to the program. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nisha. Good morning to everybody who's on the screen today, who is here with us to spend the next 3 hours going through a program which I believe is very, very important from many, many perspectives. Firstly, let me thank my friend and colleague Shashi for having laid the framework for the way we go forward, and for Nisha for her very cogent introduction of the subject and the speakers so far. I would like especially to welcome Dr. Patel and my colleagues from overseas who represent the Quad's collective wisdom on such important issues, and not forgetting some of those eminent persons who are here who will speak after me. But the first thing is I would like to start with the question, what is so important about this program and why are we here today? There are two issues that need to be flagged, that China is and will always remain a country of concern for India, And the more we know about China and how it operates and how its national security objectives and interests are articulated, both in action and in words, and also that people in the southern part of India, in peninsular India, need to know what are the threats that arise from Chinese expectations about how India develops. So last year's Deciphering China webinar was a part where we had 80 scholars, okay, speakers from across the spectrum who spoke to us. And it was for the first time that such a major event had taken place outside Delhi. So we want Peninsular India to become a repository of knowledge, of wisdom, expertise, and consultancy on China. And I believe that China does not merely threaten us in the north, the, the north, the west, and the northeast, but yes, there are more than many indications of how Chinese seem to or will try and look at India from other angles, right from Sri Lanka, from Myanmar, from other areas where China is developing its strength in much more manner than what it has been earlier. Why did we choose this particular subject? Because I think in the national discourse on China, the conversation has remained focused on issues that had not brought into light the serious dangers we face from the Chinese advent into the rare earths environment. I think, if I'm not wrong, in 2008, the Chinese National People's Council passed an act which prohibited China from exploiting its own natural resources, but to lay emphasis on importing these resources. It wanted China to save its rare earth materials for a future. I think that was the beginning of a period that we needed to take notice. And especially in India, we need to take notice because export of rare earth materials has become a matter of export for us, matter of revenue earning. And how long this is going to fill the coffers and how long we're going to do this is something that we need to look at. Thirdly, what is important is you look at the areas around India, Myanmar, for example. There is so much mineral interest in Myanmar that the Chinese have focused particularly on the Rakhine state. And the Chinese interest in Rakhine state is not only meant to look at the Indian Ocean or the Bay of Bengal as its outlet from Yunnan province, but it's looking at the rare earth materials that lie in the southwestern state of Rakhine state or the Arakan state. We need to focus on this. We also need to focus on the extension of this thing into Bangladesh, because after all, Bangladesh is another strategic partner of ours, and the Chinese will wish to extend their influence into this particular area. As we all know, Arunachal Pradesh is itself an area which has got very vast deposits of rare earth material. So I think we need to understand the problem that lie nearer our borders. We need to understand what are the problems that lie in our neighborhood and its immediate concentric. And India needs to focus by way of policy, by way of being proactive, and trying to build coalitions or alliances with our neighbors to ensure that our interests are well protected and that the Chinese do not take much more than what is necessary for them. We have policies that seem to be working for us in Africa, in countries like Mozambique, Angola, where we are traditionally long-term partners of theirs, and we think we need to focus. Having said all this, then why did we look at, we wanted to hear from our colleagues in, say, in Japan, in Taiwan, in Australia, and in the US as to why this has become so important for us in the context of the 21st century China, and how do we react to all this? Are we on time, or are we behind time, or are we going to be ahead of time? What kind of policies do we need? I think the COVID-19 has created a new normal for us. The status quo of the past is no longer applicable. Do we need to think? what is the end result of our webinar? I would like to say that it should be a good handbook for policymakers, good textbook for people, academics who try to research this. Because if you look at some of the organizations in India, for example, the Geological Survey of India, I wish I had one of my colleagues was to attend, but he could not. But these are the kind of organizations we need to link: government, private world, others, research organizations, R&D institutions, and not forgetting our partners in ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific area. Having said all this, I think it is more important for us to spread knowledge. We are not creating anything that should go across, that should be counter to India's diplomatic relations with China, but we have a right to pursue our national interests and objectives. And I'm sure that today's get together, today's platform will provide us some picture and a way forward. With these few words, I thought I'll give you an overview of the program, but not the least, right, to 2021, 1st of August to 2022, we are having a number of programs that will focus on China. Please be in touch with us. We will tell you what's happening next. The next couple of programs are going to be very exciting, going to be very interesting. It's going to generate a lot of interest in the minds of people who want to follow China, from either from Bangalore or from Chennai or from Delhi. The China Study Forum, which is now an amalgam of 4 institutions, we would like to partake of the help of others, whomsoever wants to participate with us. Thank you very much, and I wish the program the success which is due to it. Thank you. Over to you, Nisha.
Thank you, sir. We are honored to have Professor Dr. Bimal N. Patel, Vice Chancellor, Rashtriya Raksha University, and member, National Security Advisory Board with us today. May I now request Mr. Sashi Nair, Director and Editor of the Press Institute of India, to introduce Professor Dr. Bimal N. Patel.
It's a pleasure to introduce Professor Dr. Vimal Patel. He's the Vice Chancellor of the Rashtriya Raksha University in Gandhinagar, an institution of national importance. He's a member of the National Security Advisory Board of India. Professor Patel has served as the Director or the Vice Chancellor of the Gujarat National Law University in Gandhinagar for 2 consecutive terms between 2008 and 2019. He has also served as a member of the 21st Law Commission of India during 2015 to 2018. Professor Patel obtained his PhD in International Law and Master of Laws from Leiden University in the Netherlands, and another doctorate in International Law from the Jaipur National University. Dr. Patel is a former international civil servant, scholar, and academician of international law and diplomacy. As an international law jurist, he has extensively studied, researched, commented, and published works on the administrative, procedural, and substantive jurisprudence of the International Court of Justice, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, and the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. Professor Patel has been instrumental in drafting many legislations, such as the Antarctic Act of India, Merchant Shipping Bill 2016, Private Maritime Security Companies Rules, and Deep Seabed Mining Act of India. He is visiting professor with the University of Nanterre in Paris, a fellow at the Institute of Air and Space Law, University of Cologne, Germany, the Hague Academy of International Law, the Netherlands, the Xiamen Academy of International Law in China, and the International Foundation for the Law of the Sea in Hamburg. We look forward to your inaugural address, Professor Patel.
Thank you very much. I thank Chennai Center for China Studies, Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, Press Institute of India. I'm very grateful to Mr. Ablikar, Mr. Nair, and my distinguished friend, Mr. Krishan Verma, for his valuable guidance and instrumental role. Thank you, Mr. Anandan, for all the coordination. The topics which we are going to cover today will give us global, or we can say macro, geopolitical and geostrategical, as well as economic security perspective. I'm sure the outcome and tangible suggestions emerging from this conference will be useful in complementing policy and operational measures undertaken by countries feeling vulnerability or want to prevent dominance or monopoly of any government for the greater good of sustainable development goals by 2030. The topics are known to us: perils of China's dominance in global rare earth supply chain, what should India do with its rare earth reserves, growing need to break China's dominance. And so all the topics which are being covered today are going to be extremely useful. Friends, REE or rare earth, if we use, are crucial raw materials for use in high-tech applications in various strategic sectors such as defense, atomic energy, space, oil, green energy, electronics. These are also the precise areas in which India is willing to grow fast, and these are game changers for India's future of economic, political, and security clout and development. Our vision of the minerals vertical is to prepare strategic policies for the sector to ensure, number one, the enhanced exploration and extraction of minerals, raw material security for all user industries, focus on rare earths and technology minerals, ensure, very importantly, overall sustainability, generate more employment opportunities, and decrease overall minerals import and enhance export. So this is broad vision of our minerals vertical as far as REE is concerned. While we are all aware that as many as 35 rare earth minerals, we particularly have huge interest in 12 strategic minerals. Those are tin, cobalt, lithium, germanium, gallium, lanthanum, beryllium, niobium, tantalum, tungsten, bismuth, and selenium at this stage. For example, US Department of Interior sometime back, I think 2018, identified 35 critical minerals for national and economic security, and US is counting on mainly 17 of those, whereas as I said, we are looking at 12 strategic minerals. So totally we are talking 35. Some of us, and a number of you may have read the 2020 Niti Aayog report, which gives latest updates on the vision mission of REE. Friends, we are facing situations similar to 1970s. High inflation coupled with stagflation and rising oil prices, making us very, very economically vulnerable. And on top of that, we are having a monopoly or dominance of one government across the board. Therefore, the first thing is, like what major countries have done, we need to work out our vulnerability map. How much REE were imported, for example. Report shows that US, it imports 98% processed REE from China in 2018. Like United States also, we also face problems of refining capacity. Although India has the advantage of labor costs, I would say reasonable environmental regulations, which are definitely strict, which China can easily afford. In this regard, I would like to quote, and the quote goes, our nation's undue reliance on critical minerals in processed or unprocessed form from foreign adversaries constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat, which has its source in substantial part outside the United States to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States. The former President Trump wrote, I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with that threat. What I'm trying to say, when President Trump signed this executive order, the US has considered this as a national emergency. In other words, countries like India also, Japan also, we are facing the same issues. US measures are important reminders as how a vulnerable nation can cope up with this challenge. If you look at Executive Order 13,817 or later in 2020, if you look at Executive Order 13,953, clearly lay down the mission of the United States, how to overcome this vulnerability. We in India, we need to begin mineral extraction strikes and refinement projects. And in this regard, strategic partnerships are definitely possible with friendly countries. Increasing tariffs on imports from China, and that is what China has been doing, can be considered with all its implications, but I am particularly satisfied that with Atmanirbhar Bharat mission, involving even possible legal disputes if a country like China would increase tariff on imports from a country like India, we can certainly avoid through our national security exception clause. So there are possibilities. As my distinguished predecessor spoke, Chinese reliance on Myanmar for reconcentration, particularly in 2020, is known. No surprise why China in the Security Council, and as India is also a member, why China is silent, what is happening in Myanmar, and why a country like India should try to protect and promote interests with our eastern neighbor, Myanmar. United States, as I mentioned, has huge vulnerability, but US has luxury because US has already worked out, carved out relations, strategic partnerships with Denmark, Greenland, Mexico, some of the Latin American countries, which India does not have. In other words, our vulnerability is multifold, and we have few options while the challenges and the goals are very high. Since I mentioned about how to go about friendly countries, we all know that the governments of Australia, Botswana, Canada, Peru, and United States, they founded the Energy Resource Governance Initiative. The ERGI has definitely goals. I'm unaware, but I believe that India can consider this option of becoming a partner of ERGI initiative, like what we have Solar Energy Initiative, which India took a lead. Similarly, India, realizing the vulnerability and its dependence, can consider becoming a member of Energy Resource Governance Initiative, which our strategic partner, United States and Australia, are members of. Research institutions like Rashtriya Raksha University or IITs can undertake case studies For example, as my distinguished predecessor mentioned, our rare earth reserves in particular areas of eastern regions. Now we are talking here indigenous engagement, a case study on indigenous engagement, case study on public-private partnership, case study on awarding mineral leases, case study on social license to operate, case study on environmental management, case study on red dog mine. Responsible mining requires thoughtful policy from start to finish, before the soil hit dirt and after the mine closed down. The case study, when I was working for this address, it is called Red Dog Mine Project, which has been taken by ERGI. This particular project embodies this responsible attitude and demonstrates an equitable balance between people, profit, and the planet. Why United States has done it? Because US did not want dirty pollution in its territorial lands, which China could afford. We are in a dynamic situation. As I said, we have low labor cost, we have reasonable environmental standards. So these kind of case studies would be very useful to the policymakers in the government. India can consider reducing its reliance on China to significant percentage as a national security goal. We know Japan plans to bring its reliance on imports from China by less than 50% in 2025. Why? We all are aware how China cut off mineral supply to Japan on issue of Senkaku Islands. China employed a combination of economic warfare, usually legally permissible tools, or we can say lawfare using economic tools. I'm sure Dr. Satoru Nagao will be able to bring some useful insights, as like United States, Japan also feels vulnerable. Japan also set up the goal, and I'm quite sure Dr. Nagao will be able to tell us the progress as far as the reliance of Japan on imports from China is concerned. Some of the initiatives which India has taken, particularly with Africa, does hold huge futures. Our relations with Democratic Republic of Congo, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Gabon, South Africa, but I would also say Tanzania, Burundi, Madagascar, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. In other words, realizing the potential and our genuine partnership with African countries, unlike just economic exploitation that was done by China, and earlier the colonial powers such as Germany, United Kingdom, and France are very bitter reminders to our African friends. India, as a benign, friendly country across the globe, in this regard, can actually forge very good partnership with African countries and give a different model, which China could not provide. And of course, as I said, former colonial powers of Europe could not provide. Africa will remain crucial to Chinese rare earth supply chains, and therefore for India as well. Of course, I'm not going into the statistics, but as one excellent paper in which Cohen and Grant summarizes, China commands 85% of RE export market, 62% of global raw mineral materials, importing 2 billion worth of critical materials and REs. And as I was mentioning about lawfare, in the event of an acute international crisis, China would likely to use its leverage to further geostrategic aims by imposing critical mineral embargoes. I give an example of Japan already in this respect. China can indeed use unilateral measures, an international legal tool which has been famously used so far United States, be it CATSA or otherwise. In other words, China learning the tricks from Western powers can use the unilateral international legal measures to impose embargoes. And therefore, the war is already on. I believe that developing domestic capacities to mine and refine critical minerals across India can be a very important priority for all our agencies. But at the same time, our private sector can become the primary driver instead of government in the production like other minerals, mining and processing. As we all know, reports are there that the Biden administration is under pressure to reauthorize the Defense Production Act to speed up the planning, construction and operation of some of the mineral facilities. The names are known to all of us, as expanding domestic mineral projects address a key strategic vulnerability. India, following this call and already feeling the heat, have to move ahead. In this regard, again, while preparing for this address, the Atmanirbhar Bharat of the Prime Minister reminds me to what President Nixon had done in 1973 in the wake of oil embargo. President Nixon in 1973 declared Project Independence. Some of you might be knowing already. In this respect, the Prime Minister of India's vision is very far-sighted. And I may say that this vision and mission must be harnessed with all sincerity, otherwise country will pay the price of the peril. Friends, we need policies, plans, strategic alliances, as I said, also research cells across universities, think tanks like the one we have today, but very importantly, target goals like what Japan has already subscribed to. Another important work done by National Security Council Secretariat of India and Niti Aayog is our Arctic strategy. China calls Arctic as a near neighbor. Why? Because China wants access to these resources, which are said to include over 90 billion barrels of oil and estimated $1 trillion worth of rare earth minerals, metals. As we all know, India is a member, one of the 7 members of the famous Spitsbergen Treaty of 1921. As we celebrate 100 years, it is time for us, though this treaty was signed by the then Emperor India, India has to rejuvenate its interest in the Spitsbergen Treaty, because the Spitsbergen Treaty, in which China was never a party. China became much later, I think in this century only, and has started calling, Arctic as almost kind of distant neighbor. As India prepares for defense manufacturing base, and as I said, Honorable Prime Minister would like that India becomes Atmanirbhar in this sector, the REE will become an essential, be it fighter engines, missile guidance systems, or space-based satellites, communication systems. Atmanirbhar Bharat in these areas can only be achieved if we have sustainable strategies for this. I give you the statistics about rare earth, but rare earth elements are not necessarily scarce, but they're hard to locate actually. Instead of appearing as rain in rock formation like gold or silver, capturing rare earth requires miners to extract a large volume of rock and then process it to separate rare earth elements, which I just mentioned earlier. This applies because we are fifth largest reported reservoirs of REE. And here comes the role of research institutions and technology institutions like IITs or Indian Institute of Technologies. As I said, rare earth elements are not necessarily scarce, but they are hard to locate. And then the issue of processing and refining comes. Why US is vulnerable today, which was once 30 years back. US was 30 years back global rare earth controlling market of the world because United States had different policy preferences. China used in this last 30 years low cost, lax environmental standards, and government determination to change from the entire narrative. Now China is controlling the global market. Friends, India has all three. As I say, low labor cost, environmental framework, and government vision and mission. What we need to do is we have to produce more efficiently and more economically than China and other countries. If this happens, and now that we have partnerships with US, Australia, and Japan, the Quad, so we can see Quad not only helping stabilize the oceanic order, but also help stabilizing the monopoly of any particular government. I'm more concerned about the sustainable development goals for my country, but also for the globe as a whole. And when we are talking SDG, we cannot have any country with India, with China, with United States controlling the entire global market, because then we'll be failing global citizens from the developmental needs. And here again, our model of partnerships with Africa, which also holds great future as far as the SDGs are concerned, comes into play because, as I say, ours is a benign model. Ours is a genuine partnerships. And this is what needs to be done. Already, our Indian Rare Earth Minerals Limited have prepared roadmaps, and the observations of the previous chairman are very illuminating. And I believe persons like Dr. R.N. Patra, the previous chairman, and those who have been in this IRIL, they can help us, institutions like RRU, IITs, and also strategic institutions like the China Study Center, the IDSA. So we can work technology, security, and the geostrategic and geopolitical think tanks to realize the government mission. As I said earlier, we have the fifth largest reserves, nearly twice as much as Australia. Thus, we are capable of becoming what China is doing today. But what we require is the strategies. And if that happens, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to achieve the mission of Atmanirbhar Bharat in this regard as well. No doubt, there are reforms, there are challenges, but with the right kind of leadership, right kind of institutional backup, and very importantly, National Security Council and the Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, taking lead on various of these security initiatives, I believe that we can find right partnerships within India and outside India to provide necessary policy input, actionable research input to policymakers, and we can also be involved in number of operational activities through undertaking case studies, which I mentioned, and also play a very important role in this ERGI initiative at governmental level, but also at think tank level. Once again, I thank you all for organizing this international conference. I'm extremely grateful for my international participants, friendly countries, and my colleagues in various think tanks across the country. And we look forward and we assure you fullest and complete support in this mission of protecting and promoting national security and foreign policy interests of India. Thank you very much.